In the sterile conference room of TechFlow Tower, a talented software engineer was about to discover the true cost of speaking truth to power. What started as a routine performance review took a shocking turn when they came face to face with systematic corporate corruption. Maya Reeves wasn't your typical tech employee. For 3 years, she had spent her life building TechFlow's cloud infrastructure from the ground up, known for her meticulous attention to security protocols and unwavering ethical standards. When she encountered evidence of data manipulation and privacy violations during a routine audit, she had no idea she was walking into a carefully orchestrated trap. Maya's decision to document and report these violations through proper channels would lead to her own professional destruction and a dangerous game of corporate retaliation. What began as a whistleblower's attempt to protect user privacy would become a cautionary tale about the price of challenging powerful institutions. The tech industry would never be the same after Maya discovered that sometimes the only way to fight systemic corruption is to burn down the very systems you helped create. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Chen's apartment existed in a perpetual state of digital twilight. 3 27-inch monitors cast their blue glow across her cramped San Francisco studio, transforming the pre-dawn darkness into something that resembled the bridge of a spaceship more than a home. She'd been awake since 4:30 a.m., nursing her third cup of coffee while monitoring the cascade of metrics that painted the health of TechFlow's infrastructure in real time. Green numbers meant everything was running smoothly. Red meant someone's day was about to get very complicated. Everything was green. It always was when Maya was watching. She stretched her fingers, joints popping from hours of typing, and glanced at the corner of her screen where a small notification reminded her of the 10 a.m. weekly infrastructure review. Just another Tuesday meeting with the engineering team to discuss performance optimizations and capacity planning. Maya had been running these meetings for 2 years now, ever since she'd been promoted to senior DevOps engineer. They were routine, predictable, and usually involved Sarah Kim asking thoughtful questions while the other engineers half-listened from their own home offices scattered across the Bay Area. At 9:58 a.m., Maya clicked the Zoom link and waited for the familiar faces to populate her screen. She took a sip of coffee and opened her notes from the previous week, ready to discuss the database optimization project that had been consuming her evenings. The first face to appear wasn't Sarah's. David Sterling, TechFlow's CEO, materialized in the main window with his perfectly styled silver hair and the kind of expensive shirt that probably cost more than Maya's monthly grocery budget. Behind him, she could see the glass walls of the executive conference room on the 20th floor, a place Maya had been to exactly twice in her 3 years at the company. A cold weight settled in Maya's stomach. "Maya," David said, his voice carrying that particular blend of authority and practiced empathy that executives learned in leadership seminars. "Thank you for joining us this morning." The second face to appear was Marcus Torres from HR. Maya had worked with Marcus on a few projects involving security compliance, and she'd always liked him. He had the demeanor of someone who genuinely cared about people, which made him an oddity in corporate America. But now, seeing his uncomfortable expression and the way he avoided making eye contact with his camera, Maya felt the first sharp spike of panic. "I'm afraid this isn't our usual infrastructure meeting," David continued, consulting something off-screen. "We need to discuss some changes to your role at TechFlow." Maya's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. In the small window showing her own video feed, she watched her face transform from confusion to dawning horror. She looked tired, she realized. When was the last time she'd taken a real day off? When was the last time she'd left her apartment for something other than groceries, or the occasional emergency trip to the office? "Changes?" she managed to say. David's expression never wavered from its professional mask. "Maya, as you know, TechFlow is entering a critical phase as we prepare for our initial public offering. This requires us to optimize our operational efficiency, and ensure we're positioned for sustainable growth. After careful consideration of our current resource allocation and strategic objectives, we've made the difficult decision to eliminate several positions as part of a broader cost optimization initiative. The words hit Maya like a series of physical blows. Eliminate. Positions. Cost optimization. She'd heard this language before, in the business articles she read to better understand the company she'd devoted her life to building. But she'd never imagined hearing it directed at her. "You're firing me," she said flatly. Marcus finally looked at his camera, and Maya could see something that might have been guilt in his eyes. "Maya, we want to emphasize that this decision in no way reflects the quality of your work or your contributions to TechFlow. You've been an invaluable member of our team. Then why?" The question came out sharper than Maya intended, but she was past caring about professional courtesy. David leaned forward slightly, as if sharing a confidence. "The reality is that we need to streamline our infrastructure team ahead of the IPO. We've identified opportunities to consolidate responsibilities and leverage some exciting new automated solutions that will reduce our operational overhead." Automated solutions. Maya felt something cold and bitter rising in her throat. She'd built TechFlow's infrastructure from the ground up, working nights and weekends to create systems that could scale with the company's explosive growth. She'd automated everything that could be automated, optimized every database query, and designed redundancies that had kept them online through 3 major traffic spikes that should have brought them to their knees. "You're replacing me with software," she said. "We're evolving our operational model," David corrected smoothly. "And while we're grateful for everything you've contributed, we feel this is the right time to make this transition. Your final day will be today, and Marcus will walk you through the separation process." Maya stared at the screen, watching David deliver her professional death sentence with the same tone he might use to discuss quarterly revenue targets. In the corner of her screen, her own face looked hollow, like someone had just told her a loved one had died, which, in a way, they had. "I need to gather my personal files," Maya said automatically. "Of course," Marcus said, relief evident in his voice now that the worst part was over. "You'll have 30 minutes to collect any personal materials before your access is revoked. I'll email you the details about your final paycheck, Cobra information." "And 30 minutes?" Maya interrupted. "I've been here for 3 years. I have projects, documentation, transition notes that need to be—" "I'm sure the team can handle the transition," David said, already reaching for something off camera. "Maya, I want you to know that this wasn't an easy decision. You're a talented engineer, and I'm confident you'll land on your feet." The meeting ended. Maya stared at the blank screen for several seconds, her reflection multiplied across 3 monitors. Around her, the metrics continued their endless dance of green numbers and flowing charts, monitoring the infrastructure she'd built with her own hands, her own sleepless nights, her own sacrifice of everything that might have resembled a normal life. She opened her browser and navigated to TechFlow's investor relations page. The headline made her stomach lurch. "TechFlow reports record Q3 profits, announces IPO timeline." David Sterling's smiling face looked back at her from a photo accompanying an article about the company's unprecedented growth and bright future. Maya Chen had been eliminated for cost optimization on the same day her CEO announced record profits. She looked at the clock in the corner of her screen. 10:17 a.m. 13 minutes since her world had ended. 17 minutes left before they would cut her access to everything she'd built. For 3 years, Maya had been the invisible guardian of TechFlow's digital empire. She knew every server, every database, every API endpoint and security protocol. She had root access to systems that processed millions of transactions daily, that stored the personal data of hundreds of thousands of users, that powered the apps and services that had made David Sterling rich enough to afford $20 shirts. In 17 minutes, they would try to lock her out of her own creation. Maya's hands moved to her keyboard, muscle memory guiding her to the administrative dashboard she'd designed. Every system she'd built, every safeguard she'd implemented, every carefully constructed redundancy. It was all there, waiting for her commands. The green numbers continued their dance, oblivious to the storm building behind Maya Chen's tired eyes. She had 17 minutes to decide who she really was: the loyal employee who would walk away quietly, or something else entirely. Her fingers began to type. Maya's fingers moved across the keyboard with the fluid precision of a concert pianist, each keystroke deliberate and purposeful. The administrative dashboard materialized on her center monitor, a command center she'd designed to give her godlike oversight of TechFlow's entire digital ecosystem. From here, she could see everything: server loads, database connections, API, response times, security logs, backup schedules. It was her digital kingdom, and in 14 minutes, they would try to exile her from it forever. She navigated to her email first, a habit born from 3 years of constant vigilance. The inbox was a graveyard of her dedication. Midnight alerts about system failures she'd fixed while others slept. Weekend notifications about performance optimizations she'd implemented during her supposed time off. Vacation requests she'd never submitted because there was always another crisis, another deadline, another fire to extinguish. But today, buried among the routine notifications, was something that made her blood freeze. An email thread from 2 weeks ago, forwarded accidentally to the engineering mailing list before being quickly recalled. The subject line read, Q4 Headcount Optimization, Confidential. Maya's name appeared in the 3rd paragraph, alongside 5 others marked for strategic elimination. She clicked through the thread, watching her professional execution unfold in corporate euphemisms. David Sterling had signed off on her termination while she was working 18-hour days to stabilize the database cluster that would handle the IPO traffic surge. Marcus Torres had raised concerns about institutional knowledge retention, only to be overruled by the CFO's insistence on operational efficiency metrics. They had planned this for weeks. While Maya burned through her health and sanity to keep their systems running, they had been planning to throw her away like a broken server. The rage that filled her wasn't hot. It was cold, crystalline, and utterly focused. Maya opened a new terminal window and began typing commands that came to her as naturally as breathing. She started with the backup systems, those redundant safeguards she'd built to protect TechFlow from exactly the kind of catastrophic failure she was about to engineer. First, she altered the backup rotation schedules, changing the retention policies from 30 days to 3. The system would begin deleting older backups immediately, leaving only the most recent snapshots that would soon become corrupted themselves. She moved to the monitoring systems next, adjusting alert thresholds so that critical failures would register as minor warnings. The automated responses she'd programmed to handle common issues were modified with subtle logic errors that would cause them to fail silently. Maya paused, her cursor hovering over the database configuration files. These systems processed millions of user transactions daily, stored personal information for hundreds of thousands of customers, powered the applications that dozens of partner companies depended on. She thought of Sarah Kim, probably at her desk right now working on the payment processing module that would launch next week. Sarah, who had a 2-year-old daughter and a mortgage in Oakland and dreams of starting her own company someday. Her phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "Hey, missed you in the infrastructure meeting this morning. Everything okay?" Maya stared at the message, her throat tightening. She couldn't tell Sarah what was happening. Not yet, not while she was still deciding what kind of person she was going to become in the next 10 minutes. Instead, she typed back, "Something came up. Can we talk later? There's some stuff you should know about the backup systems." It wasn't quite a warning, but it wasn't nothing either. Maya returned to her screens, where the green numbers continued their hypnotic dance. She opened the configuration file for the primary database cluster and began making changes that would cascade through the system like digital dominoes. A modified connection timeout here, an altered memory allocation there, a subtle change to the query optimization algorithms that would cause performance to degrade exponentially under load. She was an artist painting her masterpiece in malicious code. The email notification chimed again. This time it was from Marcus Torres. Maya, I wanted to reach out personally about this morning's meeting. I know this is difficult, and I want you to know that I fought for you in the discussions. If you need anything during this transition, please don't hesitate to contact me. Maya read the message twice, searching for insincerity and finding only genuine regret. Marcus had tried to save her job. In another timeline, that might have mattered. But in this timeline, Maya Chen was discovering that 3 years of loyalty could be erased with a 30-minute notice and some corporate buzzwords about optimization. She clicked reply and typed, "Thank you for trying, Marcus. I hope you remember this conversation when the shit hits the fan." She hesitated for a moment, then deleted the message without sending it. No point in warning them. Not yet. The clock read 10:26 a.m., 4 minutes left. Maya opened one final terminal window and began crafting what she privately called her digital time bomb, a script that would lie dormant in the system, waiting for the right conditions to trigger a cascade of failures. It was elegant in its simplicity, a few dozen lines of code that would cause the infrastructure to slowly cannibalize itself over the coming days. She embedded the script in the automated deployment system, disguised as a routine optimization patch. It would activate 12 hours after her access was revoked, giving her time to be long gone before anyone realized what was happening. The beauty of it was that it would look like a series of unrelated failures, the kind of cascading issues that could happen to any complex system under stress. At 10:29 a.m., Maya executed her final commands and watched as her modifications disappeared into the vast digital nervous system of TechFlow. Then she cleared her browser history, deleted her terminal logs, and closed all the administrative windows that had been her domain for 3 years. At exactly 10:30 a.m., her access was revoked. The screens that had shown her kingdom now displayed sterile login prompts, politely asking for credentials she no longer possessed. Maya leaned back in her chair and looked around her apartment. The same cramped studio, the same 3 monitors, the same half-empty coffee cup growing cold on her desk. But something fundamental had changed in the space between 10 and 10:30 a.m. She was no longer Maya Chen, loyal employee of TechFlow. She wasn't sure what she was now, but she was about to find out. She picked up her phone and called Sarah Kim. "Maya." Sarah's voice was warm with relief. "I was worried when you missed the meeting. What's going on?" Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of what she'd just done settling over her like a lead blanket. "Sarah, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully." "Okay," Sarah said, her tone shifting to concern. "What is it?" "I don't work at TechFlow anymore. They fired me this morning. And there are some things about the infrastructure. Some things you're going to need to know." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several heartbeats. "Maya," Sarah finally said, her voice very quiet. "What did you do?" Maya stared at her reflection in the black screen of her monitor, seeing a stranger looking back at her. "I'm not sure yet," she whispered, "but I guess we're all about to find out." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 24 hours after Maya's access was revoked, the first domino fell at 10:47 p.m. Sarah Kim was still at her desk in TechFlow's downtown office, the glow of her monitor painting her face in pale blue as she traced through the payment processing code that had been consuming her evenings for the past month. The office around her was a graveyard of abandoned workstations and half-empty coffee cups, but Sarah had always preferred the quiet focus of late-night coding sessions. Her daughter Emma was asleep at home with her husband, and the office's Silence let her think without interruption. The first sign of trouble was subtle, a slight lag in the database query response times that appeared as yellow warnings on her secondary monitor. Sarah frowned and pulled up the system dashboard Maya had built, watching as response times crept from their usual 50 milliseconds to 80, then 120. Not critical yet, but unusual enough to warrant attention. She reached for her phone to text Maya, then remembered with a sharp pang that Maya was gone. Fired. The word still felt impossible in Sarah's mind. Maya Chen didn't get fired. She was TechFlow's infrastructure. Asking Maya to leave was like asking gravity to take a vacation. The warnings turned orange. Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up monitoring logs and system metrics. The database cluster was struggling under what appeared to be normal load, but the patterns were wrong. Memory usage was spiking in irregular bursts, and the query optimizer seemed to be making increasingly poor decisions about execution plans. Across the city, Maya sat in her darkened apartment, 3 monitors casting their familiar glow across her face. She'd spent the day in a strange fugue state, alternating between manic energy and crushing exhaustion. Part of her had hoped that TechFlow would call, that David Sterling would realize his mistake and beg her to return. Another part, a growing part, wanted to watch it all burn. She refreshed TechFlow's public status page for the 10th time that evening. Still green across the board, but Maya knew how to read between the lines. The response time graphs showed subtle increases that would be invisible to most users, but screamed warnings to anyone who understood the system's normal rhythms. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Haven't heard from you in a few days. Everything okay?" Maya stared at the message, trying to remember the last time she'd called Robert Chen. Had it been 2 weeks? 3? When had she become the kind of daughter who forgot to check in with the man who'd sacrificed everything to give her opportunities he'd never had? She typed back, "Just dealing with some work stuff. We'll call you soon." It wasn't technically a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Back at TechFlow, Sarah's evening had transformed from quiet productivity into crisis management. The database performance had degraded past yellow warnings into red alerts, and she'd escalated to the on-call engineering team. 3 other developers had logged in remotely, their Slack channels filling with technical speculation and increasingly urgent status updates. "Anyone know where the backup monitoring scripts are stored?" typed Alex Martinez, one of the senior back-end engineers. "The automated alerts aren't firing properly." Sarah felt a chill of recognition. Maya had mentioned something cryptic about the backup systems during their last phone call, something Sarah hadn't fully processed in the shock of learning about the termination. "I think Maya might have left some documentation," Sarah typed. Back, knowing even as she wrote it that Maya's documentation was likely to be as inaccessible as Maya herself. The primary API started throwing timeout errors at 11:23 p.m. Maya watched the cascade begin through TechFlow's public APIs, monitoring the degradation through developer tools and status pages that most users would never see. Customer-facing applications were starting to slow down, response times creeping toward the threshold where users would notice lag in their mobile apps and web interfaces. She felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and growing unease. This was what David Sterling deserved, a taste of what TechFlow looked like without the infrastructure expertise he'd dismissed as non-essential. But as Maya watched the failure spread, she began to understand the difference between targeted revenge and widespread destruction. Her laptop chimed with a news alert. TechFlow experiences service disruptions ahead of major IPO announcement. The article was barely 3 paragraphs, buried in the technology section of a local news site, but it meant the problems were becoming visible to the outside world. Maya's phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. "Maya." Sarah's voice was strained with exhaustion and barely controlled panic. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Maya's throat felt dry. "What's going on?" The infrastructure is falling apart. Nothing makes sense. The monitoring systems are missing alerts. The backup procedures aren't working properly, and the database performance has degraded by 60% in the last 4 hours. Sarah paused, and Maya could hear the weight of realization in her silence. Did you do something to the systems before you left? Maya stared at her reflection in the black screen of her center monitor. This was the moment of truth. She could lie, claim innocence, let Sarah and her team struggle through the crisis without understanding its true cause. Or she could admit what she'd done and face the consequences. Sarah, Maya said quietly, how many people are working on this right now? 6 of us, maybe 7 if we can reach Tom. Maya, please. And David Sterling? Is he involved in the crisis response? Sarah's laugh was bitter. David's in meetings about the IPO timeline. He keeps asking when we'll have everything back to normal, so it doesn't impact the announcement. Maya closed her eyes. Even in the middle of a system-wide crisis, David Sterling was more concerned about his stock offering than the people working through the night to fix problems he'd helped create. Sarah, Maya said, I can't tell you exactly what's wrong, but I can tell you that it's going to get worse before it gets better. The issues you're seeing now, they're not isolated problems. They're symptoms of something deeper. Maya, what did you do? I made a choice, Maya said, the words feeling strange in her mouth. And now we all have to live with the consequences. She hung up before Sarah could respond, then turned off her phone and sat in the darkness of her apartment, watching the green numbers on her screens slowly turn yellow, then orange, then red. The cascade had begun, and Maya Chen was no longer sure she could control where it would end. Maya woke at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of her phone buzzing against her nightstand. She'd finally managed to fall asleep around midnight, exhausted by the emotional weight of watching her digital time bombs detonate across TechFlow's infrastructure. The caller ID showed her father's name, and Maya's heart immediately clenched with guilt and fear. Dad? She answered, her voice rough with sleep. Maya. Robert Chen's voice carried the careful tone he used when he was trying not to sound worried. I couldn't sleep. Something feels wrong. Are you okay? Maya sat up in bed, surrounded by the familiar blue glow of her monitors that she never fully turned off. Even in sleep, she remained tethered to the digital world that had consumed her life. I'm fine. Dad, just some work stress. You always say that, but this is different. A father knows. There was a pause, and Maya could picture him in his small kitchen, probably making tea at this ungodly hour because his daughter's troubles had invaded his dreams. Maya, whatever is happening, remember who you are. Remember what we taught. You about doing the right thing even when it's hard. The words hit her like a physical blow. Robert Chen had immigrated to America with nothing but determination and a belief that hard work and integrity would build a better life for his family. He'd cleaned office buildings at night and worked construction during the day to pay for Maya's education, never once complaining about the sacrifice. Dad, I'm not asking you to tell me everything, but I'm asking you to be the person I raised, the person your mother would be proud of. Maya's throat tightened. Her mother had died when Maya was 15, but Robert still spoke of her, as if she were watching from somewhere beyond, holding her daughter accountable to principles that seemed increasingly fragile in the face of corporate cruelty. After hanging up, Maya couldn't return to sleep. She found herself scrolling through news feeds and social media, watching the ripple effects of TechFlow's infrastructure failures spread across the internet like digital wildfire. The headlines were getting worse. TechFlow outages disrupt thousands of small businesses. Mental health app offline during crisis, hotline surge. Educational platform down during final exam week. That last headline led Maya to an article that made her stomach drop. TechFlow's infrastructure didn't just power their own applications. It provided back-end services for dozens of smaller companies that couldn't afford their own server farms. Maya had built those systems to be stable and reliable, never considering that her expertise might one day be weaponized against the very people who depended on it. She clicked through to a forum thread where affected users were sharing their stories. A teacher in Oakland couldn't access the grading platform her school district used. A food truck owner in San Jose couldn't process credit card payments. A college student couldn't submit his senior thesis because the university's submission portal was down. But the comment that stopped Maya cold was from someone with the username Our Mindfulness App Taught Jordan. Day 2 of our mental health platform being down. We serve over 50,000 users dealing with anxiety, depression, and crisis intervention. Our crisis hotline integration is offline. People are suffering because of corporate incompetence. TechFlow down. Mental health matters. Maya's hands trembled as she opened a new browser tab and searched for Mindfulness App TechFlow outage. The results painted a picture that made her feel physically sick. Jordan Mitchell, a 26-year-old developer fresh out of a coding bootcamp, had spent 2 years building a mental health application that provided 24/7 support for vulnerable populations. The app relied entirely on TechFlow's infrastructure for data storage, user authentication, and crisis intervention features. According to the articles, Jordan's app had grown to serve thousands of users who couldn't afford traditional therapy. The platform's AI-powered crisis detection system had prevented dozens of suicide attempts over the past year. And now it was offline because Maya Chen wanted revenge against a CEO who would never feel the consequences of her actions. Maya found Jordan's personal website and scrolled through his blog posts about building technology to help people. His most recent entry, posted just hours ago, was titled, When Infrastructure Fails, People Suffer. In it, he described getting calls from users in crisis who couldn't access the support tools they'd come to depend on. One paragraph hit Maya like a physical blow. I built this app because I know what it's like to feel hopeless and alone. I know what it's like to need help at 2 a.m. when everything feels impossible. Tonight, I'm getting emails from users who are scared and desperate, and I can't help them because our entire backend is hosted on infrastructure that's falling apart. I'm one person trying to fix problems that are completely outside my control, and people are suffering because of it. Maya closed her laptop and walked to her window, staring out at the San Francisco skyline where thousands of lights twinkled in office buildings and apartments. Each light represented someone whose life might be touched by the digital chaos she'd unleashed. She'd thought her revenge was surgical, targeted at the corporate machine that had chewed her up and spit her out. But technology wasn't surgical. It was interconnected, interdependent, and indifferent to the motivations of those who wielded it. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Chen, this is Agent Elena Vasquez with the FBI Cybercrime Division. We'd like to speak with you about recent issues with TechFlow's infrastructure. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. Maya stared at the message, her heart pounding. She'd known this moment would come eventually, but seeing it spelled out in a text message made it feel suddenly, terrifyingly real. The FBI was involved. What had started as a moment of rage in her apartment had escalated into a federal investigation. She thought about Jordan Mitchell, probably awake right now trying to rebuild his mental health platform on different infrastructure while his users suffered. She thought about Sarah Kim, working through her third consecutive night to fix problems she didn't understand. She thought about her father, sensing trouble in his sleep because his daughter had chosen revenge over the values he'd spent a lifetime teaching her. Maya opened her laptop and navigated to a secure email service she'd set up years ago for emergencies. She began typing an anonymous message to Jordan Mitchell, providing him with technical workarounds that might help him migrate his application to more stable infrastructure. It wasn't enough. Nothing could undo the harm she'd already caused. But it was something. As she worked, Maya realized she was facing a choice that would define not just her future, but the kind of person she would become. She could continue down the path of destruction, watching from the shadows as her digital sabotage spread like a virus through systems that innocent people depended on. Or she could find a way to stop the cascade she'd started, even if it meant sacrificing herself in the process. The FBI was already closing in. The damage was spreading beyond her control. And somewhere in the digital darkness, people who had never heard of Maya Chen or David Sterling were suffering because of choices made in a moment of rage and betrayal. Maya looked at her reflection in the dark window and wondered if it was too late to become the person her father had raised her to be. Agent Elena Vasquez arrived at TechFlow's headquarters at 8:30 a.m. with a laptop bag, a thermos of black coffee, and the methodical patience of someone who had spent 15 years untangling digital crimes. The sleek glass building in Soma looked like every other tech company in San Francisco, all chrome and exposed brick and motivational posters about disrupting various industries. But Elena's trained eye caught the signs of crisis. Employees clustered in worried conversations, the unusual number of people working on what should have been a normal Thursday morning, and the barely controlled panic radiating from the executive floors. She'd seen this pattern before. Infrastructure attacks weren't like traditional crimes. They unfolded slowly, revealing their scope over days or weeks as systems failed in cascading waves. The perpetrators often underestimated the reach of their actions, believing they could precisely target their revenge. They were almost always wrong. Elena's first interview was with David Sterling, who received her in his corner office with the kind of performative concern that executives learned in crisis management seminars. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of the Bay Bridge, but Elena noticed his attention kept drifting to his phone, where she could see a stream of urgent messages from his board of directors. "Agent Vasquez, thank you for coming so quickly," Sterling said, gesturing to a chair across from his massive desk. "This attack on our infrastructure is clearly the work of sophisticated hackers, possibly state-sponsored actors trying to undermine our IPO." Elena opened her laptop and began typing notes. She'd heard this theory before. Whenever a tech company faced internal sabotage, executives preferred to blame external threats rather than examine their own workplace practices. "When did you first notice the problems?" "Tuesday night, around 11 p.m. Our monitoring systems started showing degraded performance across multiple services." Sterling's tone shifted into the kind of corporate doublespeak Elena had learned to decode over years of investigating white-collar crime. "We immediately brought in our best people to address the situation." "And those best people would be?" "Our engineering team, led by Sarah Kim. She's been working around the clock to restore stability." Elena made a note. "I understand you recently made some personnel changes in your infrastructure team." Sterling's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "We're always optimizing our organizational structure to align with strategic objectives. It's part of maintaining operational efficiency in a competitive market." The buzzwords came so smoothly that Elena suspected Sterling had practiced this exact response. "Specifically, I'm referring to Maya Chen. She was terminated on Tuesday morning, correct?" Maya was a talented engineer, but her position was eliminated as part of a broader restructuring initiative. The decision was purely strategic and had nothing to do with her individual performance. Elena had read Maya Chen's personnel file during the drive over. 3 years of exemplary reviews, commendations for working through critical system failures, and a recommendation for promotion that had been submitted just 2 weeks before her termination. And this restructuring happened to coincide with record quarterly profits. Sterling's smile became strained. "Agent Vasquez, I hope you're not suggesting that a disgruntled employee would be capable of this kind of sophisticated attack. Our infrastructure is protected by multiple layers of security." "Security systems designed by Maya Chen," Elena said quietly. The interview with Sarah Kim was more revealing. Elena found her in a conference room surrounded by whiteboards covered in technical diagrams and system architecture notes. Sarah looked like she hadn't slept in days, her eyes red with exhaustion and stress. "Maya was the best engineer I've..." ever worked with, Sarah said without preamble when Elena asked about her former colleague. She built our entire infrastructure from scratch. Asking me to fix these problems without Maya is like asking me to perform surgery with my eyes closed. Do you believe Maya could be responsible for the current issues? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at the whiteboards that documented 3 days of failed attempts to stabilize systems she didn't fully understand. The patterns don't make sense. These failures are hitting exactly the systems Maya knew best, in ways that suggest intimate knowledge of our architecture. But Maya wouldn't. She stopped, shaking her head. I don't want to believe it, but the alternative is that we're dealing with coincidences that strain credibility. Elena pulled up security logs on her laptop. I need to ask you about backup, procedures, and administrative access protocols. As Sarah walked her through the technical details, Elena began to piece together a picture of sophisticated sabotage disguised as system failures. The attack wasn't crude or obvious. It was elegant, surgical, and demonstrated the kind of deep system knowledge that would take an outsider months to acquire. After leaving TechFlow, Elena drove across the city to Maya Chen's apartment building in the Richmond district. The building was a converted Victorian that had been carved into studio apartments for tech workers who couldn't afford closer accommodation to their downtown offices. Elena had seen dozens of similar buildings during her years investigating Silicon Valley crimes, warehouses for human resources, as sterile and disposable as the server farms that powered the digital economy. Maya's apartment was on the 3rd floor, but when Elena knocked, there was no answer. The building manager, a tired-looking woman in her 60s, confirmed that she hadn't seen Maya in 2 days. Quiet girl, the manager said. Never caused any trouble, but she had those computer screens going all hours of the night. You could see the glow under her door even at 3 a.m. Elena left her business card and drove to the address listed for Maya's emergency contact. Robert Chen, in a modest house in the Sunset District. The neighborhood felt different from the trendy areas where most tech workers lived. Older, more established, with small houses that had been in families for decades rather than investment properties flipped for maximum profit. Robert Chen answered the door before Elena finished knocking. He was a slight man in his 60s with calloused hands and the kind of quiet dignity that came from a lifetime of honest work. His eyes held the particular worry of a parent who sensed his child was in serious trouble. "You're looking for Maya," he said before Elena could introduce herself. "She's not here, but she needs help." "Mr. Chen, I'm Agent Elena Vasquez with the FBI. I'd like to ask you some questions about your daughter." Robert invited her into a living room that was a shrine to Maya's achievements: framed diplomas, awards from programming competitions, photos of her graduation from MIT. But Elena noticed the pictures stopped around 2 years ago, as if Maya's life had become too consumed by work to generate memories worth preserving. "Maya is a good girl," Robert said, settling into a worn armchair. "But this job, this company, it changed her. She stopped calling, stopped visiting. When she did come by, she looked like a ghost. All work, no life, no happiness. When did you last speak with her?" 2 nights ago. She called very late. Sounded upset. Wouldn't tell me what was wrong, but a father knows." Robert's voice carried the weight of immigrant parents who had sacrificed everything for their children's opportunities, only to watch success become a different kind of prison. "Agent Vasquez, my daughter is not a bad person, but I think she's made some very bad choices." Elena's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Agent Vasquez, this is Maya Chen. I know you're looking for me. We need to talk, but not at my apartment or my father's house. There are things you need to understand about what's happening at TechFlow. Meet me at Ocean Beach, South Lot, 1 hour. Come alone." Elena stared at the message, recognizing the decision point that defined many cybercrime investigations. Maya Chen was ready to surface, but on her own terms. The question was whether she was planning to confess, flee, or attempt to justify actions that had spiraled far beyond her original intent. Elena thanked Robert Chen and headed for her car, knowing that the next hour would determine whether this case ended with justice or tragedy. Ocean Beach stretched endlessly in both directions, a gray expanse of sand and surf under San Francisco's perpetually overcast sky. Elena Vasquez parked in the south lot as instructed, watching joggers and dog walkers navigate the windswept beach while she waited for Maya Chen to appear. The Pacific Ocean rolled in with its usual indifferent persistence, waves erasing footprints, and sandcastles with the same mechanical rhythm that had been clearing the slate for millennia. Maya emerged from behind a weathered beach pavilion at exactly the appointed time, her slight figure bundled in an oversized hoodie that made her look younger than her 28 years. She moved with the careful deliberation of someone who had rehearsed this moment repeatedly, each step calculated to project control she didn't actually feel. Elena remained seated in her car for a moment, studying Maya through the windshield. The young woman looked exhausted, her dark hair unkempt and her usual precise posture replaced by the hunched shoulders of someone carrying an unbearable weight. When Maya spotted Elena's government sedan, she raised one hand in a tentative wave that somehow managed to convey both surrender and defiance. They met at a picnic table overlooking the water, the constant wind making conversation feel more private than it actually was. Maya sat across from Elena with her back to the ocean, as if she couldn't bear to look at something so vast and permanent, while her own world crumbled. "Thank you for coming alone," Maya said, her voice barely audible over the wind and waves. Elena opened a small digital recorder and placed it on the weathered wooden table between them. "Maya Chen, I'm Agent Elena Vasquez with the FBI Cybercrime Division. You've asked to speak with me, and I want you to understand that anything you say can be used in a federal prosecution. Do you want to continue this conversation?" Maya stared at the recorder for several seconds, then nodded. "I need to tell you what really happened. Not the version David Sterling will give you, but the truth." "I'm listening." "I destroyed TechFlow's infrastructure," Maya said simply. "Not all of it, and not permanently, but I sabotaged critical systems in ways that would cause cascading, failures over several days. I did it because they fired me 30 minutes after announcing record profits, and I wanted David Sterling to understand what TechFlow looked like without the person who built it." Elena had expected this confession, but hearing it stated so directly still caught her off guard. Most cybercriminals spent hours justifying their actions, building elaborate narratives about corporate wrongdoing or systemic injustice. Maya's stark honesty was either refreshing or terrifying, depending on your perspective. "Can you estimate the financial damage?" Elena asked. Maya's laugh was bitter. "Millions of dollars in lost revenue, probably tens of millions when you factor in the IPO delay and reputation damage. But that's not the worst part." She pulled out her phone and showed Elena a news article about Jordan Mitchell's mental health app. "I didn't know about the collateral damage. I thought I was targeting TechFlow, but I was actually attacking everyone who depended on infrastructure I built to be reliable." Elena studied Maya's face, looking for signs of manipulation or practiced remorse. Instead, she saw something that reminded her of her own younger self. A brilliant technologist who had learned too late that expertise without wisdom could be a dangerous combination. "Maya, I need to ask you about your background. I know you were a software engineer before joining the FBI. What made you change careers?" Elena hesitated, then decided that honesty might be the best way to reach someone who seemed desperate for authentic human connection. "I was working for a startup that got acquired by a larger company. The new management eliminated my entire team to cut costs, even though we'd just delivered a product that generated millions in revenue. I felt betrayed, angry, disposable." She paused, watching recognition flicker in Maya's eyes. "I thought about sabotage. I had access to everything, just like you did. But you didn't do it. No, I channeled that anger into a career change. Instead, I wanted to catch people who use technology to hurt others. Elena leaned forward slightly. But I understand the temptation. The feeling that the only way to get justice is to take it yourself. Maya was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands folded on the table. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of someone who had been carrying guilt alone for days. My father called me yesterday. He didn't know what I'd done, but he could sense something was wrong. He told me to remember who I am, to be the person he raised. Maya looked up at Elena with eyes that were bright with unshed tears. My parents came to this country with nothing. My father worked 3 jobs to pay for my education because he believed that technology could make the world better, and I used everything he gave me to hurt people. The question now is what you want to do about it, Elena said carefully. I want to fix it. I want to help restore the systems I broke, minimize the damage to innocent people like Jordan Mitchell. But I also want David Sterling to face consequences for how he treats employees. This whole crisis could have been prevented if TechFlow had basic respect for the people who build their technology. Elena nodded slowly. She'd seen this pattern. In dozens of corporate cybercrime cases, individual perpetrators who caused harm while trying to address systemic problems that were very real. The law didn't provide much room for nuance, but prosecutors and judges had discretion in how they approached cases with complex motivations. Maya, I can't make promises about what will happen legally, but I can tell you that cooperation and genuine remorse count for something. If you're willing to help fix what you broke, if you're willing to testify about the conditions that led to this situation, those things matter. Maya reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a USB drive. This contains documentation of everything I did, the specific systems I modified, the scripts I embedded, the timeline of when different failures would trigger. It also has evidence of how TechFlow treats employees, including emails about my termination that show it was planned weeks in advance. Elena took the drive, feeling its weight in her palm. Such a small thing to contain so much destruction and possibility for redemption. There's one more thing, Maya said. Marcus Torres, the HR director. He tried to stop my firing. He's not part of the problem, and when this all comes out, he's going to suffer for trying to do the right thing. Someone should know that. As they sat at the wind-battered picnic table, Elena found herself thinking about the complexity of justice in the digital age. Maya Chen had committed serious crimes that had hurt innocent people, but she'd also exposed real problems in how technology companies treated their most valuable employees. The challenge was finding a path forward that held individuals accountable, while addressing the systemic issues that created the conditions for those crimes. Are you ready to come in? Elena asked finally. Maya looked out at the Pacific Ocean for the first time since they'd sat down, watching waves crash against the shore with the same indifferent persistence they'd maintained for millions of years. I think so, she said quietly. I think I'm ready to face whatever comes next. They walked back to their cars together, Maya's surrender marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of a much longer process of accountability, redemption, and systemic change. The FBI's cybercrime unit offices hummed with the constant whir of servers and the soft clicking of keyboards. Maya sat at a borrowed workstation, her fingers trembling slightly as she navigated through TechFlow's compromised systems. Agent Chen stood behind her, watching every keystroke, while FBI technicians worked at adjacent terminals to document her confession. There, Maya said, pointing to a section of code on her screen. That's the logic bomb I planted in the payment processing system. It's designed to trigger random failures every few hours. Her voice was hollow, devoid of the satisfaction she'd once imagined she'd feel watching TechFlow burn. Agent Rodriguez leaned over her shoulder. Can you disable it? Maya's hands hovered over the keyboard. I can try, but... She pulled up another window, showing cascading error logs. Some of these systems have been down for so long that they've created dependency failures. The payment system isn't just broken from my code, it's broken because other systems it relies on have been corrupted by extended downtime. The weight of that realization hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't just planted bombs, she'd created a domino effect that was continuing to spread damage even as she tried to stop it. Agent Chen made a note. We need to prioritize critical systems first. Healthcare, small business services, anything that affects public safety. Healthcare? Maya's stomach dropped. I thought TechFlow only did corporate solutions. They acquired MedConnect last year, Agent Rodriguez explained grimly. Mental health apps, patient monitoring systems. Dr. Jordan Mitchell's suicide prevention platform runs on TechFlow infrastructure. Maya's hands began to shake. She pulled up the monitoring dashboard and felt the blood drain from her face. MedConnect services had been experiencing intermittent outages for 36 hours. Oh God, what have I done? Before Agent Chen could respond, Maya's laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Sarah Kim's name appeared on screen, and Maya's heart clenched. She looked to the agents, who nodded their permission. Sarah's face appeared, pale and drawn. The sophisticated conference room behind her suggested she was still at TechFlow, probably pulling another all-nighter trying to fix Maya's sabotage. Maya. Sarah's voice was carefully controlled, professional. The FBI said you're helping with recovery efforts. Sarah, Maya's voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to get caught up in this. I heard about the suspension pending investigation. Sarah's composure wavered for just a moment. 3 years, Maya. 3 years we worked together. I defended you to Sterling when you were fired. I vouched for your character. And you. You made me an accomplice without my knowledge. You're not an accomplice. You didn't know. My access credentials were used for half these breaches, Sarah interrupted. My code repositories, my administrative privileges. Do you know what it's like to discover that your best friend has been using your trust to destroy everything you've worked for? Maya wiped tears from her cheeks. I was angry. I was so angry, and I thought I was being precise, surgical. I thought I could hurt Sterling without hurting anyone else. Well, you were wrong. Sarah's voice hardened. Do you want to know what your surgical attack has done? 43 small businesses have been unable to process payments for 2 days. That's payroll, Maya, people not getting paid, rent not being made. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The video call expanded to include a third participant. Maya's breath caught as she recognized Jordan Mitchell, the developer whose mental health app she'd unknowingly crippled. Dr. Mitchell, Maya whispered. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. Know your platform was on TechFlow infrastructure. Jordan's face was drawn with exhaustion and anger. Last night, a 17-year-old in Phoenix couldn't access our crisis intervention chatbot during a suicidal episode. Our automated monitoring systems that flag high-risk behavior patterns, down. Our emergency contact protocols, offline. His voice was steady, but Maya could see the fury in his eyes. Her parents found her in time, but barely. She's in the ICU. Maya doubled over as if she'd been punched. Will she be okay? She's alive. But Maya, you need to understand something. Jordan leaned closer to his camera. My app exists because I lost my own sister to suicide. She couldn't access help when she needed it most. I've spent 5 years building something that could have saved her, and you nearly destroyed it because you were angry at your boss. Jordan, Maya couldn't finish the sentence. There were no words adequate for this level of harm. I don't want your apology, Jordan continued. I want you to understand that your revenge fantasy has real victims. People you'll never meet, whose stories you'll never know, but whose lives you've damaged. Sarah's voice was quieter now. Maya, there's something else. Marcus Torres is being terminated. They're saying he was your inside accomplice. What? No. Maya looked up at Agent Chen. Marcus barely helped me. He just answered a few technical questions. He had no idea what I was planning. Sterling doesn't care, Sarah replied. He needs scapegoats, and Marcus was convenient. A young Latino engineer who had access to the systems? Perfect for Sterling's narrative. On cue, Maya's phone buzzed with a news alert. She glanced at it and saw David Sterling's face on a live stream, standing behind a podium with the TechFlow logo prominently displayed. What we've experienced is nothing short of digital terrorism, Sterling was saying, his voice carrying the perfect tone of wounded authority. A disgruntled former employee, aided by inside accomplices, attempted to destroy not just our company, but the livelihoods of thousands of people who depend on our services. Agent Rodriguez muted the laptop's speakers and turned up the phone volume. But TechFlow is stronger than any act of sabotage, Sterling continued. We've worked around the clock to restore services, and I'm pleased to announce that our IPO will proceed as scheduled. We won't let terrorists win. Maya stared at the screen in disbelief. Terrorists? He's calling me a terrorist? He's been working this angle since yesterday, Sarah said bitterly. Full victim narrative. He's painting himself as the hero who saved the company from your attack. The board is eating it up. Stock price is actually up in pre-market trading. Sterling's press conference continued. I want to be clear that TechFlow takes full responsibility for the security vulnerabilities that allowed this attack. We're implementing new protocols and will be compensating affected customers. But we must also recognize that this was a deliberate act of sabotage by someone who chose destruction over dialogue. Maya laughed bitterly. Dialogue? I tried dialogue. I filed reports. I documented everything. I went through proper channels. He destroyed my career and covered up his crimes. And now he's using your response to those crimes to make himself look like a victim, Agent Chen observed. Classic manipulation. The press conference was taking questions now. A reporter asked about the scope of the damage, and Sterling smoothly deflected. While the attack was sophisticated, our robust backup systems and dedicated team minimized the impact. We expect full service restoration within hours, not days. Sarah shook her head. He's lying. Maya, some of what you did. We might not be able to fully repair it for weeks. The cascading failures have created data integrity issues that will require manual verification of millions of records. But he's going to take the company public anyway? Maya asked. Next week, Sarah confirmed. He's spinning this as a story of resilience and strong leadership under pressure. The underwriters are actually impressed with how he's handling the crisis. Maya stared at Sterling's image on her phone screen, watching him field questions with practiced ease. Even after everything that had happened, he was finding a way to profit from the chaos. She realized with bitter clarity that her sabotage hadn't just failed to hurt him, it had given him exactly what he needed to complete his transformation from corporate criminal to celebrated CEO. Maya. Jordan's voice drew her attention back to the video call. I need you to understand something. What you did to Sterling, what he did to you, that's between you two. But the people hurt by your actions? We didn't choose to be part of your war. Maya nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. And I don't know how to make it right. You can't, Jordan said simply. Some damage can't be undone, but you can stop making it worse. The video call ended, leaving Maya alone with the FBI agents and the weight of her choices. On her phone, Sterling's press conference was wrapping up with thunderous applause from assembled investors and media. Agent Chen placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. Let's get back to work. The faster we can restore these systems, the fewer people get hurt. Maya turned back to her keyboard, knowing that each line of code she fixed was a small step toward redemption that might never be enough. But it was the only step she could take. As she worked, Sterling's final words from the press conference echoed in her mind. TechFlow has always been about connecting people and building a better future. We won't let anyone tear that down. The irony wasn't lost on her. In trying to expose Sterling's lies, she had given him the perfect stage to tell the biggest lie of all. 6 months later, Maya sat in the visitor's room of the Federal Minimum Security Facility in Danbury, Connecticut. The orange jumpsuit felt less foreign now, though she still instinctively reached for pockets that weren't there. Across from her, Elena Martinez reviewed documents spread across the small metal table. "The restitution hearing is next week," Elena said, her voice gentle but professional. "The judge will determine the final amount you owe to affected parties." Maya nodded, studying the list of names and numbers. Small businesses, individuals, healthcare providers, each line item representing a life disrupted by her choices. "How much total?" "Just over $2 million, Elena replied. "But Maya, you need to understand. Most of these people aren't looking for money. They want to know you understand what you did." Through the reinforced window, Maya could see other inmates in the yard. Some played basketball, others sat in small groups talking. She'd found an unlikely community here among white-collar offenders: a former Ponzi scheme architect, an embezzling accountant, a tax evader who'd hidden millions offshore. They all shared the same hollow look of people who'd lost everything, chasing something they thought they deserved. "Dr. Mitchell wants to meet with you," Elena continued, "as part of the victim impact process." Maya's chest tightened. "The girl who... is she okay?" "She's alive, recovering, but Jordan wants you to hear her story directly." 3 days later, Maya sat in the facility's meeting room as Jordan Mitchell entered with a slight teenage girl and her parents. The girl, Sophia, looked fragile but determined, her dark hair framing a face that seemed older than 17. "I wanted to meet you," Sophia said simply, settling into the chair across from Maya. "Not to yell at you or anything. I wanted you to see me." Maya's throat constricted. "Sophia, Let me talk first," Sophia interrupted gently. "That night when I couldn't access the app, I was in my dorm room at Yale. I'd been having a really bad episode. Depression, you know? The chatbot usually helps me work through the worst of it, gives me coping strategies, connects me to human counselors when things get really dark." Maya forced herself to maintain eye contact, though every instinct screamed at her to look away. "When the app wouldn't load, I felt abandoned. Like even the one thing I could count on had given up on me." Sophia's voice remained steady, but her mother reached over to squeeze her hand. "I almost didn't call the crisis line. I almost didn't tell my roommate. I almost just gave up." "But you didn't," Maya whispered. "No. But Maya, I need you to understand something. What you did wasn't just about some corporate revenge thing. When you attack systems that people depend on for their mental health, for their safety, for their survival, you're attacking them too." Maya wiped tears from her cheeks. I know that now. I'm sorry isn't enough, but I am. I'm so sorry." Sophia leaned forward. "I've been thinking about this a lot. About anger, about wanting revenge when people hurt you. I get it. But the thing is, when you're drowning, you don't get to pull other people down with you." After they left, Maya sat alone in her cell, staring at a letter that had arrived that morning. The return address showed TechFlow Corporation. Inside, she found a check for $50,000 and a brief note from David Sterling. "Your cooperation during the investigation prevented additional damages. Consider this a gesture of goodwill." Maya stared at the check, understanding immediately what it represented. Sterling was still playing games, still manipulating the narrative. In 6 months, TechFlow's IPO had been wildly successful, making Sterling worth over $800 million. This check was a rounding error to him, but to the media, it would look like corporate magnanimity, the generous CEO helping his reformed attacker. She tore the check in half. The next morning, Maya called Elena. I want to start a foundation, she said, for victims of corporate retaliation and whistleblowers who need legal support. Maya, you're serving an 18-month sentence. You have no money. I'll have money when I get out. I'm good at what I do, and Sterling just tried to buy me off with $50,000. Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in months: purpose. He thinks this is over, but it's not. I can't undo what I did, but I can spend the rest of my life making sure other people don't face what I faced. 2 weeks later, a small article appeared in TechCrunch. Former TechFlow engineer announces cybersecurity consultation firm to help whistleblowers navigate corporate retaliation. The article mentioned Maya's conviction, but focused on her plans to provide free security audits for nonprofits and advocacy organizations. David Sterling saw the article from his corner office, now occupying the entire 47th floor of TechFlow Tower. He smiled and made a note to have his legal team monitor Maya's activities. Some people, he mused, never learned when they were beaten. But in her cell that night, Maya read letters from 3 different whistleblowers who'd reached out after seeing the article. One was a pharmaceutical researcher who'd discovered falsified trial data. Another was a defense contractor who'd found evidence of overcharging the military. The third was a social media moderator who documented the company's failure to remove violent content. Each letter reminded Maya that Sterling was wrong about one thing. Some fights were bigger than personal revenge. Some fights were worth having, even if you lost everything, especially then. As she fell asleep, Maya began mentally drafting the security protocols she'd implement when she got out. This time, she'd build something that couldn't be torn down by corporate lawyers or board meetings or IPO launches. This time, she'd build something that mattered. 2 years after release, Maya's apartment in Brooklyn was spartanly furnished, but filled with the warm glow of multiple monitors. The Whistleblower Defense Network had grown from a one-person operation run from her kitchen table to a small but effective organization with 3 full-time staff and a network of volunteer cybersecurity experts across the globe. She was debugging an encrypted communication system for a climate scientist who discovered her university was suppressing research on behalf of oil company donors when her secure phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Sarah Kim. Maya. Sarah's voice was professional but not cold. They'd slowly rebuilt a careful friendship over the past year. We need to talk. Can you meet me tonight? Somewhere private. 2 hours later, they sat. In a small cafe in Park Slope, Sarah nervously stirring her coffee while Maya waited. Despite their reconciliation, Sarah still worked at TechFlow, now as Chief Technology Officer, having survived the post-attack investigations and impressed the board with her crisis management skills. Sterling's been asking questions about you, Sarah said finally. About your clients, your funding sources, your methods. Maya's jaw tightened. Let me guess. He thinks I'm planning another attack. No, worse. He thinks you're becoming a problem that needs solving. Sarah leaned forward. Maya, TechFlow has been acquiring companies. Small security firms, consulting groups, companies that work with whistleblowers. The implication hit Maya like ice water. He's trying to corner the market on cybersecurity services that protect people from corporations like his. There's more? Sarah pulled out her phone, showing Maya a news article. 3 whistleblowers in the past 6 months, all represented by different advocacy groups. All suffered catastrophic data breaches that exposed their identities and destroyed their cases. Maya studied the article, her mind racing through the technical implications. The attacks were coordinated. Same methodology, same precision. She looked up at Sarah. You think Sterling is behind this? I think Sterling has learned from what you did to him. Instead of just silencing individual whistleblowers, he's systematically destroying the infrastructure that supports them. Maya's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from one of her current clients, Dr. Amanda Chen, a FDA researcher who'd discovered a pharmaceutical company had hidden severe side effects from a popular antidepressant. The message was brief but urgent. They found me. Everything's compromised. Going dark. Shit. Maya stood abruptly. Sarah, I have to go. Someone's in trouble. Maya, wait. Sarah grabbed her arm. There's something else. Sterling's been meeting with federal contractors. Defense Department, NSA. He's positioning TechFlow as a cybersecurity solutions provider for government whistleblower programs. The full scope of Sterling's strategy crystallized in Maya's mind. He's not just attacking existing whistleblower protection. He's trying to control it. Get government contracts to secure official channels, then use that access to identify and neutralize threats before they become public. Maya's apartment became a command center that night. She worked with her team remotely, trying to trace the breach that had compromised Dr. Chen while simultaneously hardening their own systems. At 3 a.m., her lead developer, Alex, a former NSA cryptographer who'd quit over surveillance overreach, called with bad news. Maya, we're all compromised. Someone's been inside our network for weeks, maybe months. They've mapped our entire client base, our communication protocols, everything. Maya's blood ran cold. How many people are exposed? 14 active clients, maybe 30 former ones, if someone wanted to systematically destroy these cases. Alex's voice trailed off. Maya made the hardest decision of her career. Burn it all. Wipe everything. Activate the emergency protocols. Get everyone to safe houses. What about the foundation? 2 years of work means nothing if people die because of our security failures. Maya was already pulling hard drives from her computers. Alex, remember what I told you when you joined? Sometimes the most important thing you can do is make sure the bad guys can't use your tools against innocent people. As Maya destroyed the physical evidence of the whistleblower defense network, she realized Sterling had outplayed her again. But this time, she understood the game better. This wasn't about personal revenge or even individual victories. This was about the long-term battle for information freedom in an age of corporate surveillance. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed a blocked number, but Maya recognized the voice immediately. Hello, Maya. David Sterling's voice was warm, almost friendly. I heard about your recent setback. Such a shame when security systems fail. What do you want, Sterling? I want to offer you a job. Chief Security Officer at TechFlow. 7 figures, full benefits, stock options. You'd be working on some very important government contracts. Maya almost laughed. You destroy my organization and then offer me a job? I'm offering you a chance to work within the system instead of against it. Your little vigilante network was never going to change anything, Maya. But imagine what you could accomplish with real resources, real backing. Backing from you. Backing from the people who actually run things, the people who decide which secrets are worth protecting and which ones are too dangerous for public consumption. Maya thought about Dr. Chen, probably in hiding now, about the climate scientist still waiting for secure communications, about Sophia, who'd survived her suicide attempt and was now studying cybersecurity herself, partly inspired by Maya's story of redemption. Here's my counteroffer, Sterling. Go fuck yourself. She hung up and immediately began implementing the protocols she'd been developing for exactly this scenario. The whistleblower defense network was dead, but its death would birth something harder to kill. Instead of a centralized organization, she'd create a distributed network of independent operators. Instead of a foundation that could be targeted, she'd build a movement that could survive the loss of any individual piece. 3 days later, Maya sat in a different cafe with Elena Martinez, who'd become both her lawyer and one of her closest friends. So what's next? Elena asked, reviewing the legal documents that formally dissolved the foundation. Maya smiled, pulling up an encrypted message on her phone. It was from a consortium of international human rights organizations, offering funding for a new kind of whistleblower protection service, one that would be hosted across multiple countries, making it much harder for any single corporation or government to shut down. Next, we make it impossible for people like Sterling to win by simply being richer and more connected than we are. Maya closed her laptop and stood up. He thinks this is a game where the house always wins. Time to change the rules. As she walked out into the New York afternoon, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced since before her original termination from TechFlow. Hope. Not the naive hope of someone who believed justice would automatically prevail, but the harder, more durable hope of someone who understood that some fights were worth continuing even when you couldn't see the end. Sterling had won this round, but Maya was finally playing the right game. 6 months later, the Senate hearing room buzzed with tension as cameras focused on the witness table. Maya sat between two other cybersecurity experts, her hands folded calmly as Senator Patricia Williams gavelled the session to order. The placard in front of her read, Maya Reeves, Director, Global Whistleblower Security Initiative. Ms. Reeves, Senator Williams began, you've made serious allegations about corporate interference in federal whistleblower protection programs. Can you substantiate these claims? Maya glanced at the gallery where Elena sat with a thick folder of documents. In the back row, she spotted David Sterling, impeccably dressed and radiating confidence. He'd been called to testify later in the day. Senator, over the past year, our international coalition has documented 17 separate cyber attacks targeting whistleblower protection services. These attacks show identical methodologies and appear to be coordinated by a single entity with significant resources. Senator Robert Hayes, the ranking Republican member, leaned forward. Ms. Reeves, given your own criminal history of cyber attacks, why should this committee trust your testimony? Maya had prepared for this question for months. Senator Hayes, you're absolutely right to question my credibility. I committed crimes, served my time, and have spent every day since trying to make amends. But the evidence I'm presenting today doesn't depend on trust. It depends on technical analysis that can be independently verified. She clicked a remote, displaying network traffic patterns on the room's screens. These attack signatures match tools developed by Blackstone Digital, a subsidiary of TechFlow Corporation. The same company that recently won a $200 million contract to enhance security for the SEC's whistleblower portal. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Maya continued, we believe TechFlow has systematically infiltrated whistleblower protection systems not to secure them, but to identify and neutralize potential threats to their corporate clients. Senator Williams studied the technical diagrams. Ms. Reeves, do you have proof that TechFlow deliberately compromised these systems? Maya exchanged glances with Alex, who sat in the expert witness section. They'd debated this moment for weeks. How? Much to reveal without compromising ongoing investigations. Senator, 3 days ago, Dr. Amanda Chen was found dead in her apartment. The FDA researcher who discovered hidden pharmaceutical side effects. Her death was ruled a suicide, but her encrypted files were accessed and deleted hours before her body was discovered. The room fell silent. Maya felt the weight of every eye upon her. Dr. Chen was our client. Her communications were routed through servers that only 5 people had access to. Her, myself, my lead developer, and 2 federal marshals assigned to witness protection cases. Maya's voice remained steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. One of those marshals contacted us yesterday. He's been offered a lucrative position at a TechFlow subsidiary. Senator Hayes shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Reeves, are you suggesting that a federal employee was bribed to... I'm suggesting that when you control the infrastructure that protects whistleblowers, you control who gets to speak and who gets silenced. Maya clicked to the next slide, showing a network diagram that looked like a spider's web. TechFlow now has contracts or partnerships with the SEC, FDA, EPA, and Department of Defense whistleblower programs. They're not just processing reports, they're controlling the entire information flow. The afternoon session brought David Sterling to the witness table. He moved with practiced ease, his silver hair perfectly styled, his manner conveying both authority and wounded dignity. "Senators, I want to address the serious allegations made this morning," Sterling began, his voice carrying just the right note of concern. TechFlow Corporation has spent billions developing the most advanced cybersecurity infrastructure in the world. Our work protecting government whistleblower programs has prevented dozens of security breaches and saved countless lives. Senator Williams consulted her notes. "Mr. Sterling, how do you respond to the technical evidence presented by Ms. Reeves?" Sterling's smile was patient, almost paternal. "Senator, Ms. Reeves is a convicted cyber criminal who has repeatedly attempted to damage our company through false accusations. The evidence she presents could easily be fabricated by someone with her technical skills and obvious vendetta. But the attack methodologies can be mimicked by any competent hacker," Sterling interrupted smoothly. "In fact, we believe Ms. Reeves may have conducted these attacks herself to frame TechFlow and generate publicity for her anti-corporate agenda." Maya felt her jaw clench but maintained her composure. Sterling was doing exactly what she'd expected, turning her criminal history into a weapon against her credibility. Sterling continued. "Senators, I understand the appeal of conspiracy theories, especially when presented by someone seeking redemption for past crimes. But the reality is simpler and more dangerous. Ms. Reeves represents a new breed of cyber terrorist, one who uses the language of justice to justify attacks on the very systems designed to protect vulnerable people." Senator Hayes nodded approvingly. "Mr. Sterling, what safeguards does TechFlow have in place to prevent the kind of abuse Ms. Reeves alleges?" "Multiple layers of oversight, Senator. Independent audits, federal monitoring, strict separation between our commercial and government divisions." Sterling's tone conveyed absolute confidence. "Perhaps most importantly, we've implemented new protocols specifically designed to prevent the kind of insider threats that Ms. Reeves represents." The hearing continued for another hour, but Maya could sense the mood shifting. Sterling's polished presentation and institutional credibility were winning against her technical evidence and criminal past. That evening, Maya sat in her hotel room, watching news coverage that largely favored Sterling's narrative. "Convicted hacker makes unsubstantiated claims against tech executive," read one headline. Her encrypted phone buzzed with a message from an unknown sender. "Check your email, anonymous friend." The email contained a single file, an audio recording dated from the previous week. Maya's hands trembled as she recognized the voices. David Sterling and someone identified in the metadata as Senator Hayes, personal phone. Sterling's voice was clear. "The Reeves problem will be handled tomorrow. Your questions about her credibility will discredit everything she presents. In return, TechFlow's Political Action Committee will remember your support during your re-election campaign." Hayes responded. "And the Chen investigation?" "There won't be one. Suicides don't require cybersecurity investigations." Maya stared at the recording, understanding immediately what she held. This wasn't just evidence of Sterling's guilt. It was proof of systematic corruption at the highest levels of government. But more importantly, it was proof that someone inside Sterling's organization had finally decided to become a whistleblower themselves. Maya smiled as she began uploading the recording to her distributed network of international servers. The network effect worked both ways. The same systems Sterling had tried to control were about to reveal his deepest secrets. Tomorrow, the real hearing would begin. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.